Hey, everybody, and welcome to Making Miracles Happen. We are talking about midlife, love, and finances. We want to secure our midlives or going into our midlives because we start thinking about life a little bit differently as we're hitting this time frame. It's very different than when you're in 20s and you feel like you're invincible and everything is just going to work itself out magically. It's like a fairy tale. When we hit our 30s, it hits us hard that this is not the way things are going to unfold. And so we have these amazing experts to come and walk us through the process. So I would like for my next guest to go ahead and introduce herself so we can get started. So can you just let people know your name and what it is that you do?
Thank you so much, Adrien. My name is Mónica Esgueva, and I guess I am a guide towards ascension and towards enlightenment. And I guide people wherever they are in their life. I made a big change in my own life in 2006 and 2007. And since 2008, I have been helping people identify their wounds and heal them, and also helping them overcome their challenges, and also how to get to the next step in their consciousness and in their development. And since 2008, I have been working as a transformational coach, as a therapist, regression and healing therapist. I have been guiding workshops and meditation retreats, and also through my books. So I guess in a nutshell, that's it.
How did you get into this work?
Well, it's a long story. I don't know if we have the time.
We'll take the Cliff Notes version.
Well, I was spiritual since I was a child. I was asking my parents where I come from, what is life like, why are we here, what is the meaning of our life, and they couldn't answer those questions. They just thought I was a little bit weird. But afterwards, I went to university and I had a very normal life, but I was always very spiritual. I was reading books about the spirituality and philosophy since I was a teenager. But I try to fit in, and I think a lot of people will probably relate to that. It's really trying to be like a normal person and have a normal life, even though, of course, it doesn't work. and as you were saying, you discover that a bit later. When you are in your 20s, you think that this is what you have to do, and you just follow everybody's path. But it's not your path. You have to discover your own path. So what I did is, at some point I was living in Paris. I lived in Paris for a few years, and I was having a very good life in terms of material wealth. I married early. I had a husband with an upper management position in a corporation. I had a very good job for an international business school in Paris. We were living in one of the best neighborhoods over there, and yet I was not happy. I was really dissatisfied with life. And I realized that I was not doing my mission. I was not carrying on what I came to do here. So I was just like, I need to do a change. I need to make a change. I need to do something about this. I didn't know what to do. I just knew that I wanted to contribute to the world, and I was not doing that. So in 2006, that was the year, I went to India for 3 months to study with Tibetan lamas and to receive teachings from the Dalai Lama. And that changed my life. I realized that I wanted to do things that were compassionate and they were meant to help people have a more meaningful life. And I had to do that myself first. So I went back, and 6 months later, I left everything. I left my husband, I left my house, I left the money I have, and I left Paris. And I came back to Spain, where I used to live, and I went to live with my parents in their house once again and start from scratch. So I didn't know what to do with my life. I didn't know I wanted to help people. I didn't know how to do it, or where, or how to earn a life doing that. So it was a long and windy road, but it worked out in the end.
That's awesome. I'm very fascinated that you were just going back to the beginning of your story, that you were fascinated with this ever since you were a child. You were very spiritual ever since you were a child. You were asking questions. Did your parents have the same interest, or was this just something you feel like you were born with?
No, I was born with it. I knew I was not coming from Earth. I knew that, and I remember asking my parents, "Where do I come from?" And my father was just joking with it, and he said, "Well, we just picked you up from under a bridge with gypsies." And I was like crying, bursting out crying. I was like, "How insensitive is that when you are a child?" So of course, I couldn't find any answer from the adults, because adults didn't have those answers and didn't even ask the questions. So I had to find books and find my own resources and start a quest, and a spiritual quest, like everybody else. And it's like a little bit like Joseph Campbell talks about, the journey of a hero. Well, we all have to do that. We all have to walk that journey, on that path, and find out what are we here for, each one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it interesting when I hear people's stories about, how their parents kind of set them up for the future. Those of us who didn't necessarily have that support and have the answers that we wanted went on a quest. And you really start to think about the parents that we have are so perfect to set us up for that quest. Like with your dad's answer, you're like, he's not going to help me, so I'm going to go figure this out for myself.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of people at home watching this will identify with that experience, because not everybody had that, the hand holding and the support and say, this is who we are, and so forth and such. But it also makes you really grateful and thankful that you had a parent who pushed you on that, because that's why you're here today talking to us about what it is that you do. It's pretty amazing.
I think we all choose the right circumstances and parents beforehand, before incarnation. So we know what we come here for, and we know what we have to balance in our karmas. So we just agree with people and agree with our guides. What are the circumstances and situations and people that I need to find or run into my life, and be able to push what I have to push. And there sometimes it's not going to be easy. Sometimes it's really challenging, but it doesn't mean that it was not meant to happen. There is a reason, always a reason behind everything that happens in our life. And sometimes we don't understand at the time, but in hindsight, we do. We understand that, okay, that was because of this, and I needed to work on this, and this brought me here, and this brought me there, and this, I met this person here that took me to this other place. And then it's like, oh, wow, my path makes sense. But it's only like years later, and probably we don't even understand like most part. And we will only understand the whole thing once we leave our body. Is the only way to understand our impact in the world and why we went through everything we went through.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Can I ask you, when people work with you, what kind of help can you give people in midlife to help them transition into their best life?
Well, it does depend on what the person is looking for. Sometimes they are going through a crisis, or maybe they're just very unhappy in their jobs. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's just a divorce that they're going through, and they come for help. Sometimes they want to develop because they realize that they have a potential, but they have not been able to manifest that potential in the world and in their lives, and something is holding them back, but they don't know what it is. Sometimes we don't know our own inner obstacles because they are in our subconscious mind. And that is very, very frequent, that they feel that they are meant to do something or something else, but they don't know what it is. And sometimes they feel, yes, something is holding them back. I had a very recent, I think it was last week, I had a client in my regression and healing therapy. He has been a client of mine in my transformational coaching, but we never did a regression. And he was not very much into it. But he trusted me and said, okay, I trust you. And he had been feeling for the longest time, he felt that there was an obstacle, an inner obstacle, and he didn't know what it was. And he wouldn't even be able to put his finger on it. He didn't know. So we carried on the whole regression. And at the very, very end, when I was going to just finish it, he said, I feel guilty. So we investigated in his past, and we went through different kinds of this current life that he didn't even think of before. He didn't even remember when he was a child, where he was in situations that made him feel guilty. But somehow I knew that was not the root of it. So we went back to a past life and we found it. And we found that he had a sister with whom he had sex with when he was like a teenager, or he was like 18. He was too young to know the repercussions of that, but he later on, he felt guilty. He felt very guilty for the rest of his life. And he had a very sad life because he could not forgive himself. And funnily enough, this kind of deep feeling was repeating, was still very present in his life now. And he had no idea. He was just, no, he knew something was there, but he could not have thought it was guilt, because there was nothing in this life that was really, I don't know, like showing that he has been guilty of something of that magnitude. And afterwards, he was just so happy. And he felt, okay, now I know. And I feel like a big burden that I had on my shoulders all my life has just now disappeared.
Yeah, I find it interesting, that story. I might have pinpointed something. I don't know how this is going to stand out to the audience. I always tell them to get their pen and their paper and write down their own notes, because they'll have their own profound moments. But the one that hits me is the fact that we tend to live our lives like an ostrich hiding their head in the sand. And so many people are afraid to look at their past. They're afraid to look at what they feel they have done wrong. They're afraid to look at their childhood, thinking they're going to find out how horrible they are. And then they get on their deathbeds, never having healed anything that happened, even just in this lifetime, let alone another lifetime. Yeah. And you're really showing us how when you're reborn, you take that with you. Eventually, at some point, you either have to heal it or you suffer through it. And it's like, there's no reason we can be truly living our best lives just by facing ourselves. Is that what you found?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to face our ghosts. We have to look in the closet. We have to look at our wounds. And we are afraid of suffering, but actually we create suffering, but not looking at it. We have to count on a part of our lives that is going to be always painful. We have pain. I mean, pain is something that you are born with, because we are in an earth, in a planet that is created with duality. So one of the lessons is, okay, you have to live with pain at some point. But when you want to avoid that pain, then you create suffering. And that is very difficult to heal. Pain is, I mean, it may be awkward or it may be unpleasant to face it, but you can heal it. But suffering is much deeper. And then it's more difficult. It gets more and more difficult. And then sometimes people try to escape from it, and they get into like coping mechanisms that will just tie them up. They will enchain them to their own past, and they are never able to overcome it, because they don't want to look at their ghosts. They don't want to look at their wounds. They don't want to look at the root of what I'm feeling now. And sometimes, I mean, most of the times, it's easier to have a pill so that you don't feel it, or to escape with alcohol or any other addiction, or social media, or chatting with people, you name it. You have so many ways to escape your reality, from your reality, but you never escape from it. You are always with it until you heal it. And yes, as you said, if you don't heal in this lifetime, don't worry, it will go with you to the next one.
we're like, yeah, we'll just wait and everything will go away. But in reality, it's like, don't worry, you're going to get an opportunity to heal it. Yeah, even though you're going to be suffering through it. And the best thing to do, I think, and that's what makes midlife so amazing, is that as we move into our midlives, we usually are willing to look at things differently than when we were younger. We're usually willing to see things with fresh eyes or ready to forgive or whatever it is. So it's like if people are there, and what I find is that people who, as they're getting older, they tend to think, well, it's too late for me. And it's like, this is the best time for you.
I know. I
Like,
know.
you can do it so easily if you have help.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, it all starts with a willingness. If you are willing to look into it, then the first step is already conquered. So, because awareness is the beginning of the solution. Once you become aware of something, then you can change it. As long as you respond automatically, you don't have a choice. It's like whatever you have not healed is just replaying itself and acting out in different ways in your life because it is in your subconscious mind. So only when you make it conscious and you are aware of it, then you have a choice. You can choose to keep acting or reacting the same way or choosing to do it differently. You are not a slave of your past. You can always change it. But of course, you need to change your paradigm sometimes. At the very least, you need to change the way you look at things. And that takes, as you have talked to people in your program, it takes a lot of surrendering and it takes a lot of questioning. And it takes, I think, a lot of humility, like realizing I don't know it all. And maybe the way I'm doing things is not the best way for me and for others, because it has consequences also for the people around you.
It's interesting that you say surrendering to the fact that we don't necessarily know it all. And, I remember years ago, one of my favorite sayings was, okay, I don't know everything. And I remember somebody heard me say that because I would say this to myself. I was, if I'm trying to figure things out, I would surrender to that. And somebody said that and said, oh, you can't say that. Then you're never going to get the information if you don't think you know everything. And I'm like, if I think I know everything, I'm not going to learn anything, and it actually took a lot of pressure off of me to think, I truly don't know everything. So if I think on any given day that it's too late, that I can't heal, that this is never going to go away, I'm always going to have this problem, I can go, I don't know everything. I don't know that. And if I don't know that, that means I have no reason to give up.
Exactly.
Because there might be something on the other side of that me, thinking that it's too late. If I don't know everything, there's something on the other side of that concern. And if I keep looking, I might actually find it.
And also we have to realize that we are on different levels of development, and there is a map, and this is something I talk about in my forthcoming book. There is a map of consciousness, and we have different levels of consciousness until we go to the final one, which is unity consciousness or awakening or ascension or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And if we know that we have different steps and different levels that we can climb up the ladder towards, then we have a reason to keep working on ourselves. Because the further you go on that ladder, the better you feel. And then your potential is bigger and bigger. And also the way you look at life changes. So midlife is a great opportunity to keep working on yourself and not becoming complacent and thinking that the conventional world is all there is. And that you can aspire to be an achiever and that's it. Because Western society is obsessed with achievement. No, there's much more to it. There's much more to life than just being an achiever and have like a material success. And material success never, ever fulfills you because you always want more.
It's so true. That's such wise words. And I think as we get older, we figure that out. But it's anybody who's moving into that stage and hasn't figured that out yet. What wise words to really understand and live by, and actually look at your world to see how that's been true. There's so much more to life than just this, material comforts and success and in business or money or whatever it is just a part of life. It's a very small part of life. You know, for some of us, it's just survival. But there's so much more to that, so much more to grow and experience to bring that happiness into your world. And I just love your words of wisdom. I think this has been an incredible interview so far. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Adrien, for the opportunity. You're so generous.
Thank you. So I'm very interested in telling people, number one, you have a book coming out. So it's not coming out now. So I want you to tell us a little bit about it, because people can always get on your email list to find out exactly when it comes out so that they can purchase it. So can you tell us when that's going to be out and what that book is about?
Okay, I have published already 8 books, but only in Spain and South America. And this is my first book in English, and it will be published in the US and internationally. Wow. So the book is called The 7 Levels of Wisdom. And it's really a map of consciousness. It's a map of the levels of consciousness that human beings can go through until the very last one, when we become very wise and very compassionate, and we are one with oneness. But it's also very practical, because it gives you, wherever you are on the path, it gives you like tips and ways and elements that you can work with, either to start the path or to progress on that path until the very end. And I think we all need like a guide that will just show us the map, because we all know, especially you are on a spiritual path or on a self-development path, we all know that we want to go to reach higher somehow, but we don't know how to get there. And what does it mean? So basically means that as you go upwards, then you have more consciousness, you have more awareness, you have more compassion, and the center of gravity and the lens through which you look at the world changes. So you interpret the world in a different manner, you act in a different manner, you think differently, you feel differently, and you see the world very differently as well. So those are like major changes. I will call it like paradigm changes as you go to one level from one level to the next. So life becomes very interesting when you know that you can do that, instead of just stay there and be obsessed with success, material success. And the good thing about, and you probably know about this because you have been working with a lot of celebrities, and in my one-on-one coaching sessions, I have worked with people from all walks of life, probably the same as you. But the good thing about meeting people that are famous or very wealthy or recognized, whatever, well, one of those things or all of them, you realize that they have the same problems as every other person. So it's only when you achieve your goals that you realize that your goals are never going to fulfill you, even if you achieve them, even if you attain the highest or the most important of the, I don't know, whatever you have wanted all your life, you get there and it's like, okay, I got there, and now what? It's never fulfilling. You never get the peace you aspire to. We all aspire to that inner peace. But you cannot achieve that only by material success. It's impossible. And some people, when you don't have it, you think that it's only, when you don't have that sort of fulfillment, you think it's only because you didn't get your goals. You didn't achieve them. But once you have, it's like, okay, well, I feel the same. I thought I was going to feel differently. So that is a very good sign that you need to keep walking upwards. And it's an inner transformation that you need to work on, not an outer transformation. The outer transformation is only the effect of the inner transformation, actually.
Yeah, those are wonderful words. So I have 2 amazing last questions for you. Number 1 is, do you have a miracle story to share with us today?
I think I have one for you.
I can't wait. So could you go ahead and share that with us?
It's actually very related to my book in English and my book in the US that will be published very soon. it all started in 2015. I was traveling in Mongolia, and I had this voice, very clear voice, telling me, okay, you need to write this book in English. This time is for the American market. And it's about the different levels of consciousness, which is, I thought, it's a complex kind of topic. I don't know much about it. I mean, generally speaking, I have some ideas, but not so much to just put it in a book in a very structured way. So I said, okay, I will follow the voice, because I try to follow my intuition always, and it always works out very well. So I did that. And afterwards, I tried to, well, it's not I tried, I sent submissions to every single publisher I could find. And I was completely ignored at best. And sometimes I was just rejected by every single one. So I realized, wow, this is going to be very challenging. And what if I was not meant to do this? Or maybe I was meant to do it, but not with, it's not going to manifest in the world. I don't know if you know the story of Milarepa. And if you don't, okay, I'm going to tell the story because it's a very interesting story that can also be like an example for our viewers. Milarepa is a very famous saint and yogi in Tibet from the 11th century. And he was born in a prosperous family. But when his father died, his aunt and uncle took away the wealth. So he studied sorcery to be able to take revenge. And by doing so, he killed many people. Afterwards, he regretted it, and he thought, okay, I'm just going to go into Buddhism, and I want to study with a good master, a great master. So he found Marpa, which is also a very well-known master, Tibetan master. And Marpa told him, okay, I will take you as a pupil, but only if you build a tower. So it took him a very long time to build a tower on his own. And afterwards, Marpa said, okay, it's not good enough. You have to destroy it now. So he had to do it 3 times. And only when he built the 3rd tower, Marpa, his teacher, said, okay, now I will start teaching you. You had to burn your karma. And you have been working very, very, very well on patience and humility and virtues that you didn't have before. So now I can give you instructions and I can give you initiations. And funnily enough, he became enlightened in that very same life. So I thought, well, maybe my story is like Milarepa's story. I just needed to do it. So I had to balance my karma. Who knows? So, but at the same time, I had some hope. And I knew that I had to let it go. And I had to trust the universe, that if that voice was so clear, maybe there was a purpose, and maybe at some point it will work out. But I had to be very patient, very perseverant, and had a lot of faith. And a few months ago, I heard the voice again. And the voice said, well, maybe it's time to reactivate the book. And I was like, is it? Okay, let's give it a try. So I was guided to one particular publisher, and I sent all the, everything that they asked for in the submissions. And 2 weeks later, I was offered a contract to publish it in the US and internationally. So that in and of itself was a great miracle, because it took me 5 or 6 years to get to this point. So I think it's also like, I wanted to share with our viewers, because it's like, okay, never give up. If it comes from inside, if it's not the ego, never give up. You don't know what the right timing is.
I love this story for so many reasons, but your point at the end is absolute truth. It's so interesting because, especially thinking back on my youth, like I think I was 20 years old when the very first like psychic and healer that I talked to was like, oh, you're going to write a book. And it kept coming up over and over and over again. I'm like, no. And then somebody else would tell me and somebody else would tell me. And I'm like, these people are crazy. That's never going to happen. And, 20 years down the line, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's time to write a book. And it's so interesting to think that you get the information so far ahead of time, almost to prepare you. Doesn't mean it's supposed to happen right now. But that doesn't mean you're supposed to give up. You're just being prepared. And so what a perfect story to share that sometimes it's just really about timing. It has nothing to do with doing anything wrong, or that you're not doing it correctly, or that you have to do something different. Sometimes you just have to be patient and listen.
Yes, and we sometimes think that not now, it means not forever. And it doesn't work that way. If you feel in your heart that you have to do something, there is a reason for it.
Yeah.
And follow your heart. That's why it's very important to work on the ego. So it's not that the ego voice. The ego's voice is the heart. And the heart will guide you everywhere.
It's interesting too to think that, the way that we look at things is like, well, time is running out. And we have to do something soon because time is running out. We're running out of time. And then when you think about it, if we're infinite, if we're going to have this experience billions upon billions of times, that this is just a continuation. Like there is no running out of time. So therefore, we're allowed to be patient.
Yes. And also we don't know sometimes what we have to do has to have some influence on people. And sometimes we are ready for it, but the other people are not. Mm-hmm. So there's no point in releasing something that is not going to touch people. And we have to wait for the right timing. So there are so many things so much information that is unknown to us. And we just have to trust that there is a higher voice, a higher power that will guide us through the whole thing. But we need to trust that.
I feel like that story has profound wisdom. So thank you for sharing that.
And the
very last question I have for you, and we're just going to end on your face and your words, is any words of wisdom that you actually have for the audience that you feel that you are meant to pass on?
Well, I think we have talked about many important things, and maybe 2 or 3 things that we could remind them of is be able to differentiate between the ego's voice and the heart's voice. They are very different, and one will lead you to suffering in the short or medium and long term. The other one will lead you to fulfillment. And the second one is, okay, if you follow the heart, it will lead you to the right time and the right place and the right people. And it will you just have to follow that voice, but also to trust the timing. And as you said, it's never soon enough. We are impatient. We want it right now or yesterday, if possible, but it doesn't work that way. And we have to come to terms with it. Otherwise, we're going to have a very hard time.